Usually I don't make my sermons on the, we read John today. And usually I don't have somebody read John that's on the same message as my sermon. Somehow that happened, but that's okay. The name of my sermon today is The Charcoal Fire. And I was driving up here this morning and see God changed my sermon a little bit. Because it's been almost a month since my son passed away. And I lately been thinking about the things that he liked to do. And it takes me back into the Adirondacks. And I know a lot of people here in the fall of the year, you can smell the wood stove burning. But we also, in camping, and I know Alan and Sarah would know this, and probably everybody in here has been sat around the fire, whether it be at home or at camp. You know, and I like to say that it's, for me, I have a memory, you know what I mean? For most people that grow up in the Adirondacks, we start the fire not because it's cold out, because we want to fend off the black flies. But, you know, my son always said, Dad, I'd love to, like when we used to hike back in the Northville Pleasant Trail, and we used to do a hike all these paths, and you could smell the tamarack forest, the smells and stuff. So I kind of, when I was looking at the disciples, don't you think that smell was a familiar smell? I mean, for Peter? Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and what was he standing? He was standing around a charcoal fire. And then this morning, as we listened to John, they're on the Sea of Tiberias and the Sea of Galilee, which basically a glorified lake. It's really not a big sea, but they're out there fishing, and they smell that smell, you know. So it's amazing how it didn't click with them. Hey, you know, what do you think Peter felt like when he jumped off the boat? And it's not like the kids' message. The kids' message, oh, it's cool. He jumped off the boat and he stood before Jesus. He wasn't even dripping wet, was he? But I wasn't going to bring that up in their message. But the thing is when Peter jumped off the boat, what was he thinking when he was swimming to shore? What's that?
I should have just stayed in the boat, but we would have got there.
Well, the ironic thing is it said Peter put clothes on and then jumped in because he was naked. But back then, I mean, he really wasn't naked. He had a loincloth on, but they couldn't jump down in and unhook the nuts or whatever it got caught in when they were fully clothed. So they had to take their clothing off to get in the water, you know. So maybe he got in the water and scared the fish away. I don't know. But Jesus had to come to make some fish come back. How many fish were caught? Anybody know the number of fish they caught that night in the net?
Well, according to today's meeting, it's 153.
How many?
153?
153 fish. Big fish. And here Jesus is on shore cooking them breakfast. Where'd Jesus get the fish? Huh? Here you're not only smelling that fire, but Jesus is cooking them breakfast. So the point that I'm trying to make is when Peter was swimming to shore, no, let's wait before I get to that. We've all been in boats, and I mean these boats were big enough for 7, 8 guys to be in, but I mean they weren't massive boats, you know what I mean? Like commercial fishermen back then didn't have big tanker sized ships, you know what I mean? Like we see on Deadliest Catch, right? You know. And here you got somebody shouting from shore. That would be like us Sid on the show Deadliest Catch. Hey, you know, call them on the radio, you're fishing in the wrong spot, get over here. They're like, we're experienced fishermen. What are you telling? You trying to tell me how to fish? Right? Don't we get that when we're fishers of men? Don't people tell us how to fish? when one of the kids had mentioned, or Mary Beth, I think, did she ask about, should we be worried about them catching fish? But being fishers of men, we should be fishers of men, right? My whole thought process when Peter jumped off that boat, he's swimming to shore, their conversation was short. I mean, there's not much. When he appeared into the room, it was because of doubting Thomas. Jesus wanted to prove to them that he arose, right? But Peter never got a chance to say, Lord, I'm sorry, I denied you 3 times, right? So when Peter dove off that boat and he's swimming toward shore, did that ever cross his mind? I denied him. He told me I was going to deny him 3 times. Now I got to stand in front of the Lord on the beach. Think that crossed his mind? What would we do? You know, what would we do to somebody that we done something wrong to and we got to confront them? What do we do? I know what I do. I mean, I extend God's grace. The grace that God give us, He's gonna. I rely on what the Lord would have me do. And that's why Jesus kept saying to Peter, "Do you love me?" Lord, you know I love you. And then Peter, do you love me? You know, repetitive, but why? Why was he asking that? Giving Peter back his status. And here's the thing. He was giving Peter back the status that Peter thought he lost because he done something wrong. The Lord, we've not read once in Scripture that Jesus took Peter's status away of being a disciple, did he? Not once. And the Lord gave it back to him. And that was for Peter's home to give him. Is that Peter's father? But that was for Peter's self-preservation that Jesus did that. Because Jesus didn't have to do that. He's the Lord. Right? And the thing is that, you know, when this guy from shore is calling, telling him, I mean, this is so similar to the first time, isn't it? Cast your nets over there, right? They had to drag the nets ashore. It wasn't about the fish. I don't even think in John, the 153 has the point of how many fish is not the context of the story. But John is showing us the detail of the events that happened, so it pulls it all into context. Now, the same way when we heard the story of them being out on the water, we can give it an Adirondack ambiance, right? They're out on the lake. We all been, and we know how the Adirondacks are in the morning, and over there the deserts are cool at night, right? They get downright cold sometimes. And then the daytime gets hot. So like here, I'm sure there's a fog, a damp, moist fog over the waters. So they probably can't see who's clearly on shore. See, I think that's why John writes 153, to put us in the presence of what Jesus is trying to teach. If I carry on the story, they're out on the lake, there's a morning fog. And we all know how the water is. You can talk and it carries across the water, doesn't it? Like a megaphone. So I'm sure Jesus wasn't screaming, cast your nets to the right side of the boat. And I'm sure he could probably hear them say, listen to this guy, right? But his relationship with the disciples begins with a miraculous story of catching fish, and it ends with catching fish. So what do the fish represent? Discipleship. Sometimes, God puts us in situations where it seems like there's no answer. Where we've tried everything and it just doesn't seem to work. And it can be the simplistic thing, like being fishermen and not listening. The point, like I said, wasn't about the fish that they caught, it was what Jesus was telling them to do. And I think he was also testing their obedience. There's that word again that we learn all through the years, obedience. I mean, from the time that Jesus was in the upper room and appeared to doubting Thomas and changed Thomas's, because Thomas doubted, right? So now Thomas is not a doubter. He's convicted Thomas, right? He's out doing what Jesus tells him. But the disciples are back fishing. And what were they back fishing for? What were they waiting for? Jesus to go out. To come back to get them to go out to be fishers of men. After that time, that's when really probably Christianity really evolved. Because they started going out and ministering to people the Gospels. I always want I do, because we're in Bible study on Wednesday night, I always want to say, what do you think? What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, we're fishers of men.
What's that?
Yes, we're fishers of men. That's what he's talking about.
And the thing is I think Jesus is telling them you can't do the same thing and expect different results every time, right? We're going to get the same result if we stay on the same path. And unfortunately, like I said, and I don't mean to keep bringing my son up, but it's been almost a month and still hard for the family. But my son's wife is still at day one. And I thank God that she started counseling this week, because hopefully that'll get her put down the road, because she's dragging the rest of the family back with her. This is the prime example. We're getting the same result out of the same old story. And I'm a firm believer that the greater is going to come out of this because of God. The devils beat on me and beat on me and beat on me. But my faith is persevering. And I believe that greater things are going to come out of this. But as long as we stay in that expected place of sorrow, where the results are not going to be any different. And that's the same way with the disciples. He shows himself to them, and then they move someplace else, right? But now he has to come and basically tell them, look, go feed my sheep. If you love me, go feed my sheep. I was asked this past week, how do you know that somebody is a Christian? Because we've heard all too many times, well, Jesus knows Jeff's heart. Jesus knows Sarah's heart, Paul's. We don't know their heart, but Jesus does. But I think for us, how we know people are Christians and faithful Christians is by the Spirit. Their spirit is what shows what kind of Christian they are. And I think that's what Jesus wants us to feed the Spirit. Not to have the negative effect. Like, we're going to have the pros and cons in life. That's life. I've even had people say to me, well, if God's God, why does God just not do away with everything and everything be perfect? Well, I'll give you one answer for that, because it's not part of his plan now. There's a plan, there's a reason and rhyme to all this. And someday we're going to find out what the plan is. And we're going to have that aha moment. Oh, right? We're going to find out why they have hot dog table saws and bug spray. Or how come grandma's skin so soft made you smell good, but the bugs still attacked you? The only thing you did is you went home and all the bugs were stuck to you till the skin so soft. I think for me, today's story is we meet God when we come to the end of our own resources. The disciples were fishing all night. They had done all they could do, and they were still coming in empty-handed. They're fishing on the same bodies of water. They know all the good fishing holes in the lake. They knew how to use the tackle and the nets that they had. They were experts at their trade. But they were at the end of what they could do. And that's when God showed up. And often at the point where we give up, that's when God shows up. Simon Peter was certainly at the end of his resources. He had boasted that if everyone else left Jesus, he would still be faithful, but he wasn't, was he? He had failed. He played the coward. He felt when he boasted he would stand. He failed Jesus. But God was there. God showed up. Today I get to go do a communion at Newport United Methodist Church with my wife during a funeral service. And a lot of those people are going to have all their resources spent, and God's going to show up. But it's also good for us to come to the end of our resources and realize our own weaknesses, so we can give it to God. gotta turn our control completely over to Him and forget about our personal successes. Last week's Bible study, we had talked about campers and motorcycles and old cars having all the stuff, you know, that worldly treasures, right? And it's all right to have those type of treasures, as long as we give our life to God and use God. God doesn't say, hey, Dave, you can't have a Thunderbird drive around and only drive it during the winter. But Dave said, God, you got my heart. My life is with you. And if it came down to my life with you or that car, I would give up my life for you, Lord. We have to remember when we arrive on them shores, Christ will have our breakfast ready. We see that in church every week, or when somebody from the church reaches out to us that they need prayer. That's when God comes, right? And we also learned that Christ showed Peter forgiveness, didn't he? Today's world, if somebody would have did what Peter did to the Lord, he probably wouldn't even talk to him again. The Lord gives health where there's only sickness. He gives strength when there's weakness. And He gives life when there's only death. And He gives hope when there's only despair. And He gives forgiveness when there's only shame. He's the God of new beginnings. And our new beginning could be today.